Welcome to the Humanity Leadership Podcast, where we tackle your toughest leadership challenges and share practical tools to help you lead with impact. Well, welcome, Stephanie. I appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, David. I really appreciate being here.
And we're going to get into your book shortly, but just start me off with a 30-second bio of who you are. Who's Stephanie?
Absolutely. So, Stephanie Chung, I always want to start where credit is literally due, which is I am a military child. So I grew up my whole life as a military brat. My dad was a master sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. And so I moved around every 2 years of my life. And I bring that up because as we talk about leadership, a huge part of how I see things is literally because of how I grew up on all kind of different active Air Force bases. But the long story short is that I grew up around planes, being an Air Force brat. And so I fell in love with aviation early on. And right then and there, as a little girl, I knew that I wanted to be in aviation. So I started off parking planes and loading luggage at the Boston Logan Airport. So I was a baggage handler. That was my first job. Then I got promoted into sales. I sold for the airlines for many years and then got recruited into private aviation, where I sold private aviation. Then I started to oversee teams that sold private jets and things like that. Then I was recruited and became the first Black person in U.S. history to run a major private aviation company here in the U.S. And then from there, I got recruited into a company that was going public. So it was the first aviation company to ever go public, where I was the chief growth officer for that company as well. And now I serve on a board that is a publicly held board that is creating an aircraft that will come out in 2029. And it's called XTI. And it's the first aircraft that will fly like a helicopter as well as be a corporate jet. So it's pretty exciting things going on.
So your own corporate Harrier.
Yeah.
That's going back a bit. So
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. In the preamble, we didn't get to talk about that, but my eldest is actually an E8 in the Air Force at the moment.
Oh, nice.
So
Oh, wonderful. I'm so grateful for that upbringing. And when I think about leadership, David, the reason why I'm grateful for a lot of reasons. I'm grateful because I got to meet a lot of people. When you move every 2 years of your life, you're always the new kid, right? You're always the new kid to the neighborhood, new kid to the school. You've got to constantly adapt and adjust. And so I believe that's a big part of why I can, communicate with anyone and get along for the most part with anyone, because I've probably met someone just like them before. But the bigger part of the story is growing up a military kid. You get to grow up around excellence and you don't even realize it until you become an adult, right? But if you think as a little girl, what I saw was, soldiers, people who were fit, just like Captain America, and Mrs. America kind of fit all the time. They didn't have wrinkly pants on, their shoes were shined, their shirts were creased, their hair was in place. They got more done by 6 a.m. than most of us do all day. There was cause and effect, there was order, there was leadership. My father would either salute people or people would salute him. So I grew up around excellence. I grew up around get things done. Right. I grew up seeing things as a little girl, and that had a huge impact on my leadership as I got into the workforce and started to be responsible for teams or companies, et cetera.
sounds like quite a journey and quite an experience. I imagine you've flown on a few of those private jets. So
Yeah, once you start flying private, it's a little hard not to fly private, right?
I can imagine that's probably one of the reasons why I will never do that.
Don't do it, David.
Yeah. So we're here. Your team were kind enough to send me a copy of this book, which you've got behind you as well. Ally Leadership: How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. And I think, given everything that's going on in the world, if we go back 5 years to George Floyd, which seemed to bring all of this to people's attention, and then we're now in 2025, seem to be pulling away from it a little bit. I think this kind of resource is even more important for leaders as they see that there's a financial impact to having a diverse team. And this, I like the way you said it in the book. This isn't a book about beating up white guys. This is a book about saying, doesn't matter who you are, what can you learn to be a better ally leader in the organization?
Yes.
Give me
Yeah.
this. What drove you to this?
Absolutely. So a big part of it was because I come from an industry, private aviation. I always say it's an aspirational industry, meaning people either want to fly privately or they want to be able to have the resources to at least fly privately if they choose, right? So it's very aspirational. So it's a great industry. It's a lot of fun. And I love the industry. The industry has loved me back. But it is an industry that I always say we suffer from PMS, right? We are pale, male, and stale. So it's an industry all about whether it's the marketing or the people who hold the positions or, the people that you're selling to. It's really all about men, and specifically white men, high net worth men. That's the industry. And so I was the unicorn in the industry coming up through the ranks, et cetera. And so I got to see things from a different viewpoint. And at the end of the day, what I want leaders to really come to grips with is a couple things. One, today's modern workforce, right, David, is we've got 6 different generations at work. That's unheard of. So just the intergenerational part alone, I could stop there and have us have a full conversation. But that's step one, is that we've got so many different generations at work, and they all have a different perspective, different expectation, different want, different need, different work ethic. So that's kind of scenario number one for today's modern workforce. The second part of that is that we've got women as the majority of the population. So that changes things because women see things differently. We communicate differently. So that will have an impact on the dynamics in the workplace. Then you take all the ethnic breakdowns, right? So you've got every single ethnic race growing, non-ethnic race shrinking. So that changes the dynamics. Plus, you've got LGBTQ plus, you have people with different abilities, you have neurodiverse, team members. The list goes on and on and on. So what we as leaders are really working with is the fact that we've got people who are not like us and they're not like each other. Right. And so now the question becomes, how do you lead people with so many differences? And especially when it's not something that you're familiar with yourself. So I always tell people this book is not a DEI book. It's an ROI book. I'm a growth officer. That's what I do as a profession. Companies bring me in to grow stuff. Right. And at the end of the day, the way that you will be most successful as a leader, knowing today's modern workforce, is you have to understand how to lead people who are not like you. One, they're not going away. So you may like them, not understand that generation. None of that stuff matters. They ain't going anywhere. So the options you have is 2. Either you become irrelevant as a leader or you level up. Right? Those are your options. And so I'm choosing to believe that every leader worth their salt is trying to figure out, I want to be a good leader. I want to understand how to do it. I may not necessarily know how to do it, but that's what the book is really designed for, is to say, I came through the ranks in an industry where no one looked like me, and yet I still reached the highest level. So here's some tips on how I did it in hopes that it will help you. This isn't about shame. It isn't about beating people up. It isn't about just the white guy needs to level up. The truth is every leader needs to level up because we're all leading people who are not like us.
So you actually distill it down to 4 kind of areas that you use the word ally to summarize. Just hit the highlights of that.
Sure. So ally is an acronym and it stands for ask, listen, learn, you take action. That's what it is. So, and you're asking me a great question, David, because I could have named the book Allyship, How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You, but I didn't. I named it specifically Ally Leadership because I believe this is the new way of leading, right? You must ask, listen, learn, and you take action. And though that sounds really simple, like most leaders will go, yeah, I get that part. But you have to start, if these are people who are not like you have to ask questions that you don't know the answer to. And let's be honest, a lot of times in leadership, we ask questions we actually do know the answer to, right? But you can't do that. If you're talking to someone that doesn't see the world the way that you do, maybe they have a different lived experience, they have a different culture, different race, different gender, different personality style, different way of thinking, different schooling. When I say diversity, I mean diverse in every simple shape, form, and fashion. So if you're leading people who are not like you, which is pretty much everybody, then you're going to have to ask questions that you don't know the answer to. You're going to have to listen intently, right? Nobody cares about how you see the world. This is no longer valid, right? It's all about you have to listen to meet them where we're at. So when you ask and you listen, by default, you learn something. Now, most people will stop there like, oh, that was interesting. No, you can't stop there. You have to take action, because if you just listen and you've learned something, you've built your awareness, but that's okay, right? But we're actually trying to transform. So you have to take action. And that's one of the most important parts of the book, is because we really need people to really step up. And that means you've got to take action. You've got to figure that piece out. And again, we hope that the book serves as a tool to help people get, meet them where they're at and try to figure it out together.
So what kind of action do you recommend? I mean, if I'm asking and listening and learning, what kind of action do you expect me to be taking?
Yeah, so I did another acronym because I was asking that same question, right? I'm like, okay, what did I do, seeing that I was the unicorn in my scenario? And what I did is I created another acronym called EARN. And the reason why I wanted that to be important is two reasons. One, I wanted to give people clarity of like, here's some things that you can do, like step by step. So EARN, I'll give you the acronym for that. E stands for establish an environment that people feel seen, heard, and valued. That's it. Establish that environment. Because once you do that, and I'll come back to some statistics in just a minute, but that's the very first thing you want to do. You want to create an environment where you've got employees who can raise their hand, ask questions, share their thoughts, challenge the status quo, all of that, right? That's super important. A stands for assure alignment. So why that is important is the left hand has to know what the right hand's doing. I always challenge leaders, go ask 5 people in your company, doesn't matter what level they are, ask them a couple questions. What business are we in? How does the business make money? And how does what you do contribute to what we do overall? Just ask those questions. You will be shocked at the answers that you get, because most leaders assume everybody knows. I can almost guarantee you nobody knows, right? So that's what I want leaders to do, is the left hand
There's
has
not
to know.
alignment, even if people
Yeah,
do know.
misalignment is so expensive, right? So that's the second part, is assure alignment. The R stands for rally the troops. People want to work for something bigger than themselves, but it's your job as the leader to rally that, right? And so once you get them all excited about, the bigger purpose, why are we here? What are we trying to get accomplished as an organization? And how do I play a role in that? If you do all of that, again, you've already set your team up to win. But the N is super important too, because I come from aviation. So N stands for navigate, right? You've got to navigate this whole thing, because you and I talked about this before the show. We're all leaders. We're all busy, right? There's wars, there's rumors of war, there's tariffs, there's global supply chain issues, there's labor and talent issues. There's enough going on to keep us super preoccupied. So by default, we may not navigate. And navigate simply means that people need to go, where are we going, and when are we getting there, and how are we getting there? And if we have any turbulence, what's the backup plan to still get there, right? Those are some of the basics of what I really want leaders to just, if you do those simple steps, they sound simple, but if we're being honest, we're so busy running around like our hair's on fire that we're not doing the first things first, right?
Right.
And why all this matters to your bottom line is diverse teams simply outperform traditional teams. So teams who think alike, look alike, and have the same schooling, they're just not going to give you the same type of result that you as a leader need these days. Don't take my word, look it up. Harvard, Deloitte, McKinsey, they all have the stats there. Diverse teams are just 36% more profitable, right? I'll just give you that one statistic. That should be motivation enough. But if you think of it that way, that diverse teams are going to produce more, and we as leaders, our job is to produce the best result that we can for any organization, then the easiest part of doing that is to not think of DEI as diversity, equity, inclusion. Think of DEI as ROI. Think of it that way, right? You want a better result, get a team that doesn't think like you and constantly say yes to every idea that you've got.
Well, I appreciate that. And you obviously go more into depth. I've got the ally and earn acronyms open up here. You go into more depth of that. In your experience, what's one common mistake leaders make when they're trying to connect with diverse teams?
Yeah, is they overcomplicate it, right? Because I always say that's a head and heart issue. And we watch 5-year-olds on the playground do this all day. So we were born to connect. It's life that kind of smacked it out of us, right? But the easiest way to think about this is really simple. One way that people can do it is go into an area that you don't know people don't necessarily look like you. Maybe they don't speak your language. Maybe they don't eat what you eat. Start there, right? Every neighborhood has them. And so, because now think of it this way, if any of us go to another country, when we go to the country, because we are not familiar with that country, we're asking questions we don't know the answer to. We're listening, we're learning, right? There's a certain kind of head and heart connection. We need to always do that with everyone. You don't have to leave the country to do that. You can actually leave your house and do that. Okay. So that's what I want leaders to think, is not to overcomplicate this. So one way that I've done it is, I'll give you an example because I live here in Dallas. So in Dallas, there's an area that I just discovered where it's a neighborhood full of monks, right? Thai monk community. And on Sundays, what they do is they invite the public, anybody can come, and, you can go and see their temple. You can hang out in their botanical gardens. You can, watch and spend time with the monks in the community. And you can pay to get some food, like some Thai food, homemade food. And the money and the proceeds from the food that you buy goes back to the community, and it helps the monks be able to, supply their community and all the different things. That's a simple way to do it. So not only do I go and I get to have delicious food, and I get to be in an environment where I'm not familiar, and I get to learn about a new culture and whatnot. I can bring my family to do that. It's something real simple. But what it does is it expands my mind, right? And now, and so when I say I don't want people to overcomplicate this, what tends to happen, David, and I spend most of my time on the speaking circuit, right? So I speak to Fortune 100 companies, and inevitably people will come up to me after and go, oh my gosh, this was great. I loved it. I'm an ally, right? And I'll say, great. And they'll say, yeah, I'm married to the same. Let's say we use men and women as a simple example. So a man may come up to me and say, I'm married to the same woman for 30 years. I've got, 4 daughters. I'm a girl dad. Like, Steph, I'm an ally to women. My follow-up, David, is always, that's amazing. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Tell me what you've done this week to show your allyship. And it's usually crickets, because they can't give me any real examples. So you can't call yourself an ally without any receipts to back it up. This isn't a participation trophy, right? This is what you should be able to do, is then rattle off, oh, I've done this, or I've done that, or here's how I show my allyship. And that's why the why part is so important. It's great that you build awareness, ask, listen, learn. But if you don't act, you cannot call yourself or self-anoint yourself as an ally. Your action is what will speak louder. You don't have to tell me you're an ally. I should be able to see it through your actions.
And so give us because I think that's a great point and a great push that we can say as much as we want, but it doesn't really matter until we start doing. That's when the rubber meets the road. What's a good example if you think about somebody like, is a white guy in Michigan, what's a good example or two of demonstrating that allyship?
Yeah. So let's say I'll give you a real simple one that happens every single day in most companies, right? What I share with leaders is, I don't want this to be overly complicated. So I always tell the leaders, do me a favor. This week, all I want you to do, I don't even want you to take any action. The first thing I want you to do is I just want you to watch and observe. So if you're in a meeting, it's your meeting or what have you, pay attention to who's in the meeting and who's not in the meeting. So that's step one. Pay attention to how often do they speak up in the meeting. When they speak up, how does everyone else respond? Do they listen? Do they dismiss? Right? Just pay attention. That's the first thing I want you to do. Because you're a leader, you're functioning at a higher level. Once you pay attention, by default, you'll know what to do next, because now you've observed it and you've watched, like, oh my gosh, I noticed that, there's no women in this meeting. I'll give that as an example. Or I may notice that, okay, we've got a pretty diverse meeting, but everybody agrees with each other. Nobody's actually challenging the status quo, because you can have a diverse team that looks different, but thinks the same, right? And that's just as detrimental. Maybe you'll see that whenever, Sally says something, Dave tends to cut her off, right? And dismisses it. So there's a lot of things by just you slowing down for a second and paying attention that you will by default notice. And then once you notice, I have complete confidence that you can then come up with, you're the leader, you can come up with some ideas of what to do differently for the next meeting and so on and so forth. But it starts with just observing. And then just to give you an example to even finish this thought process out, if you see that, there's no women in there or no minorities in there or what have you, maybe it's the reverse. Maybe there's no white guys in there, right? Go and invite those folks in that are not in, and then if they're there, they may not be used to speaking up in that environment. So you may have to throw them a curve, right? And say, you know what, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, David. How do you see it? Right. So you may have to do a little bit of that until they get comfortable enough to feel safe enough to say, well, here's how I see it. Right. So there's a lot of things that you can do, but it all starts first with observing. Most leaders are running around like their hair's on fire. And so they're not really stopping enough to observe and to look and to pay attention to what's going on in their organization. You do that, you'll be completely fine with what to do next.
Because your theme is around learning and encouraging that learning, you're not judging anybody for the journey that they're on. It's a
No.
matter of, as long as you're on that journey and keep
Yes.
getting better at it and keep looking to learn and improve and get to know what it's like to be in a different place. So it's that, be curious, genuinely curious, and that will
Yes.
get you a long way.
I love that word, David, because, I've stopped using the word empathy. And though I think empathy is important and we certainly should just as human beings be empathetic, but I've stopped using it because it kind of also gives the impression like, oh, that's nice, right? Right? Oh, he's sympathetic. That's so sweet. But I actually use the word curious, just like you did now, because I believe you have to be curious first before you can be empathetic, truth be told, right? But when you're curious, you just ask different questions. And then also I use the word courageous these days as well, because this stuff takes courage. It's easy to sit there and say you're an ally and not actually do anything that's inconveniences you, right? But the real differentiator between those that do and those that think they do is going to be the action part. And it's especially important when things are not convenient, right? And so that's really what we're looking for. And sometimes I realize that takes courage.
And it's that, I think that's a great insight, in that the curiosity takes courage sometimes, just to have that moment and to be willing to say, okay, I don't understand this, or I could sit and be quiet, or I
Mhm.
could actually genuinely, curiously ask the question, help me understand how you see it that way. And
Absolutely.
I may learn something from that that I may or may not agree with, but at least I've learned something that I can then use differently.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love that so much what you just said, because when I think of the head and heart issue, a lot of times we approach it from a head perspective, right? And then it starts to fall a little bit towards performative. But when you attach the heart part of it in there, which is what you're talking about, then that's a whole different ballgame. Because if people, a lot of times, let's kind of call out some of the elephants in the room. Sometimes when we start talking about conversations like DEI, some people are tired. Some people just want to get through it without saying the wrong thing, right?
Mhm.
And I can certainly understand, and just because of the climate that we're in. If we think about head and heart, what I personally like to do is whenever I'm meeting with someone or in someone's, sphere that I'm not familiar with them or maybe their culture or their, anything, I just don't know. What I will do is actually tell them that on the front end. So I would say, you know what, David, I would love to hear your story. And before we get started, I would also ask you this. And I've done this a lot, especially when I go like working in new companies. What I like to say to them is, I want to hear everything. And I'm going to ask questions because I'm genuinely curious, because that's the only way that I'm going to learn. But if you could do me a favor, I may say something or ask something that's actually offensive, and I don't even know it, right? I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm trying to learn. And so, what I would ask of you, if you would be so kind, that if I say something that is offensive to you or your community or, what have you, please stop and correct me right then and there, because I want to learn, what it is that I may have said. And so what I find, David, is when you tell people that on the front end, they can see your heart and they can see your intention. Your intention is not to, be obnoxious, right? Your intention truly is to learn. And what I find is people will meet you right there. They're like, oh yeah, no, sure, no problem at all. Absolutely. And that changes the whole dynamic of the conversation, right?
I think that's a wonderful framing, and it actually puts a label on something I've noticed. I get a pass on that in this country because of the way I speak.
Yeah.
And people actually give me the grace and say, oh, you probably don't know this, but that was actually quite offensive.
Right. Yes.
And so it's like, oh, is it? I had no idea. But I love the framing of it for somebody who doesn't have that natural kind of differentiator anyway, that says, hey, I may do this. I'm going to speak from where I'm at. And if there's something I say that doesn't work, please tell me, because I want
Right.
to be a better version of me tomorrow.
That's right, exactly. And I find it because most people, especially if they come from a marginalized community of any type, right? Age, gender, race, whatever, most people would much rather you talk to them than to not talk at all because you're afraid of saying the wrong thing. So at least if you get it out on the front end, like and I tell people, I don't even say if I say the wrong thing, I always say when I say the wrong thing, right? Because I'm just going to assume I'm going to say something stupid. This is new to me. I don't know. I just don't know. And so what I have 100% of the time always had people go, oh my gosh, absolutely. And now they're a partner with you in this process, right? Because
Yeah.
they want you to be truly an ally as well, and they're going to do their part. They know that you're not trying to be lazy. You're just truly don't understand, and they're trying to meet you where you're at.
So I know that you have a website and people can actually go to that and do a test on this.
Yeah.
Do you want to share with us where people can go for that more information?
Sure, sure. You can go to the website. We have assessments. There's an assessment in the book, but if you don't have the book, you can also just grab the assessment. I think you can get it on the website, stephaniechung.com, or you can get it at learn.stephaniechung.com, because the assessments are great too. It's a leadership assessment. It kind of helps you figure out what type of leader that you are. And then from there is a short video that I kind of explained a little bit more in depth what your results are. You get instant results. So there's lots of ways to find me, but stephaniechung.com is probably the best place to start.
Well, Stephanie, thank you very much for spending a bit of time with us today and talking about it. And I look forward to following your ongoing journey and sharing this with people.
Thank you so much for having me, David. This was fun.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That was the Humanity Leadership Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe and visit humanity.com for many more resources.